The House Oversight Subcommittee on Corporate Subsidies and State Investments will come to order. Will the clerk please take the attendance?
Chair Cara.
Here.
Representative Screen.
Present.
Beerline. Here. Wagella. Here. Pohutsky.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have 5 members present, a quorum.
Representative Beerline moves to approve the minutes of the May 14th meeting. Hearing no objection, they are approved. Today we are hearing testimony on SOAR projects from James Hohman of the Mackinac Center. Welcome back, James, and looking forward to hearing your testimony.
Thanks for having me back. Today I'm going to demonstrate that the critical industry program deals are poorly designed and that lawmakers should fix this before you approve some more deals. Now I've got comments on every deal that the state has authorized so far, and I'm going to be quoting things, so I do have some notes that I've prepared. So as you guys have probably been covered in this committee before, SOAR has 2 programs. The first one's for site preparation, and the second one is the critical industry program, which I'm focusing on today. This is the one that gives companies direct money from the state. But unlike other economic development programs the state's operated in the past, the critical industry program deals are unstructured. Administrators have broad authority to structure deals however they want. This is unlike a program like, say, MEGA, where what companies get is a refundable tax credit worth 4.25% of employee compensation. There is no such formula for critical industry program deals. The state gets to figure it out for each deal it's authorized. Now, I would have loved to also covered in this committee whether these critical industry program deals have lived up to expectations. But unfortunately, it's just too early to tell whether these deals are going to be successful. At best I can say is that they haven't been successful yet. And I'm going to give an update on where I think what was expected and where these deals are. So it's important to ask whether deals perform as expected, because most deals do not meet expectations. I looked at 20 years worth of the state's major deals for this study I've got featured, and what I found is that deals only produced 9% of what was expected. There's a massive difference between what gets announced and what actually happens. When it comes to living up to expectations, these deals are living up to what lawmakers say they're going to accomplish with these deals. There's a big difference between what they say is going to happen and what actually happens. And so I've got the table of all the major deals here, and as you can see, a lot of them wind up with no jobs at all. Some of them do exceed expectations. But when you look at the rhetoric behind the deals when they're getting made, there's rarely even an acknowledgement that deals might not deliver on their pledges. So what typically happens is the state makes an announcement. The companies often either they think that it's a good deal and proceed with it and actually make capital investments, but sometimes they don't, and then sometimes they make their capital investments, but even when they do, they rarely create the number of jobs that were expected. And oftentimes the facility closes afterwards. This is a regular theme for the state's economic development deals. The difference between announcements and performance matters. Legislators created these programs to create jobs, and that's not just my opinion, or that's part of the legislative declarations for the existence of the Michigan Strategic Fund. And it says that, to quote the statute, there is a statewide pressing need for programs to alleviate and prevent conditions of unemployment, to preserve existing jobs, and to create new jobs. Now, the deals that are designed to create jobs have been failing to deliver on this goal. But how the deals fall apart, again, the experience the state had should inform the structure of the deals going forward. And unfortunately, the critical industry program deals do not apply the lessons from the past. Deals are structured to deliver payments to companies prior to job creation. Companies are generally made for making capital expenditures, not when they employ people. And so if companies are unable to create as many jobs as were announced, lawmakers have to wait years before they can ask for the state's money back. And if companies eliminate jobs after the deals are over, the state has no recourse to getting its money back, even though it paid for jobs that are no longer there. So for most of the rest of this, I just want to cover each of the deals. There aren't that many of them, but I want to cover what was said, what was expected, how the deals are structured, and where things are right now. So the first deal was obviously for GM and Altium. While news reports said that the deal would create 4,000 jobs, the deal that the state made with the companies obligated to create just 3,200 jobs. The companies collect money based on how much it spends on building the facilities, not on how many jobs are created. And if the companies ever get to minimum job requirements, they could elect to end their contract and keep their money, regardless of whether they subsequently cut jobs. If the companies do not create their minimum number of jobs, lawmakers will have to wait until 2031 to claw back funds. And if the company loses jobs or the company closes the facilities after its agreement expires, it won't have to repay the state. Lawmakers made bold claims about what this deal would accomplish. Investing in our workers will help us bring supply chains home and ensure that Michigan is the best place to innovate, design, test, and manufacture the technology of the future, the governor said. Now, for most of these deals, I'm going to quote the governor, but that's just because the governor's quoted in these releases. I don't think she's saying that anything that previous governors wouldn't have said. So this is, I'm just trying to say what the deal sponsors say about, or to reiterate what the deal sponsors say about the deals. Now, as I said, the company would be based on capital expenses, not by whether manufacturing is more centralized in Michigan. Reports compiled by this committee say that companies have so far collected all $660 million that has been authorized, and the reports no jobs at the facility that received this deal. The next deal was with Ford. This is a deal that was announced in June of 2022. The company was offered $100.8 million to create 3,030 jobs in a number of different projects around the state. The proposed agreement would have paid the company for its capital expenses, not for compensation for new jobs. It gave leaders another opportunity to proclaim economic benefits. Said, with this announcement, Michigan has added nearly 25,000 auto jobs since I took office, and we continue to lead the future of mobility and electrification. Now, this deal in particular could not have added to Michigan's auto jobs because the deal was never finalized. I saw no reports explaining why. Next deal was with battery producer Next Energy in October of 2022. Again, the company was offered money based on capital expenditures. The deal was $200 million to create 2,112 jobs. Now, this one actually has some performance that is based on job creation, but 90% of the money that comes from the state grant is based on milestones that do not include job creation. Failures to meet some of the other milestones can trigger a callback. In addition, the state can ask for its money back if the company fails to create jobs, but it will have to wait until 2030 to do so. And if the company cuts jobs afterwards, it does not have to repay the state. The governor said the deal would secure the future of mobility and electrification right here in Michigan. Payments to the company are not based on the industry's compensation to the state, however. They are largely based on the company's capital expenditures and whether it meets investment in customer milestones. So far, $70 million of the $200 million has been paid to the company, and no jobs have been reported at the project. The next is a deal that you guys have heard a lot about already. It's the state's deal with Goshen that was passed at the same meeting, and you've covered a lot about that, but I just wanted to talk about the deal structure. Again, they also got site preparation money and tax abatements, but the critical industry portion of the deal is again structured to allow short-term payoffs without job creation. The deal requires the company to create 2,350 jobs. The company can receive 76% of its award without job creation. There is some that will be based on or will not be released to the company until it creates jobs. The state can ask for its money back if the company does not create jobs, but it'll have to wait until 2032 to do so. If the company cuts jobs afterwards, it does not have to repay the state. Now, officials had high expectations for what this deal would accomplish. It said, the governor said, "We will continue winning investments in this space and become the preeminent destination for electric vehicles and mobility companies. But payments do not depend on whether Michigan becomes the preeminent destination for electric vehicles. They are based on capital expenses." The company has not received any money on its deal yet and reports having created no jobs. The next critical industry program deal is in 2023. This was the only deal approved in 2023. And it was with Ford to create an electric battery plant in Marshall. The company would get $210 million to create 2,500 jobs. Again, the deal was structured so that payments would be based on capital expenditures. Again, saying that a lot, but I'm going to tie it all together at the end. But they're going to be based on capital expenditures rather than job creation. The state can ask for its money back if the company fails to create jobs, but it would have to wait until 2027. Policymakers said that it was a generational investment by an iconic American company that will uplift local families, small businesses, and the entire community. But payments will not be based on whether this company uplifts the entire community. It's based on capital expenditures. However, no deal was finalized and no payments on this deal were made. There was a separate deal for site preparation for this company, and $150 million has been transferred. But for this critical industry program deal was never finalized. No payments have been made, and no jobs have been reported either. 2024 saw a number of extra deals that were being made. They're generally smaller, but still kind of structured the same way with a couple of differences. In February 2024, the state made a critical industry program deal with Solar Technologies. The company was offered $68 million for 1,151 jobs. Payments were again based on when the company builds its facility, not when the company creates jobs. The state can ask for its money back if the company fails to create jobs, but it'll have to wait until 2028. The state does not have to, or the company does not have to repay the state if it eliminates jobs after 2028. Again, officials promoted the better outcomes the agreement would bring. The deal is, quote, expanding on our leadership in mobility and sustainability, creating vibrant communities, and investing in initiatives that will ensure holistic, long-term economic opportunity for all Michiganders. Payments are based on capital expenses, not whether the company provides holistic, long-term opportunities for all Michigan residents. So far, $50 million has been paid, and the company reports no jobs at the facility. Another deal is unique for the critical industry program. This is with Dow later last year in July 2024. Most of all the deals that were proposed were for job creation. This is the first one for job retention. That is to say, the program does not ask the company to create any new jobs. It asks them to not cut jobs that are already existing. And the state's offering the company $120 million to retain 5,000 jobs. Payments are again based on capital expenditures, not on job retention. The company is not even required to retain all the jobs over the life of the agreement either. Clawbacks will only occur if the company does not have 5,000 jobs in 2032. Prior to that, there does not seem to be any restrictions about how many jobs need to be retained at this facility. And after 2032, the company can eliminate jobs at this project without clawbacks from the state. No payments have been reported for this deal, and like the other programs, no jobs have been reported either. The final deal so far was the most recent deal was with Detroit Diesel in December of 2024. The company was offered $27.7 million for 436 jobs. Payments to the company are largely based on capital expenditures rather than job creation. But the final $7.7 million, it will not be paid unless the company actually meets its job creation goals. So there is a little bit of payment for job creation in these critical industry program deals. Still, if the company does not create as expected, the state will have to wait until 2033 to ask for its money back. Officials trumpeted the outcomes the deal would deliver. Supporting the company helps create hundreds of new jobs while bolstering Michigan as an international leader in the automotive industry for both manufacturers and the associated supply chain. Payments are not based on whether whether they bolster Michigan's international leadership in the auto industry. They're based on capital expenditures. No payments or jobs have been reported from this deal. Now, covered a lot of ground, but to the summaries, there have been 9 deals. They propose to spend $1.46 billion in taxpayer money to create 14,779 jobs. Now, I'm not sure whether this is what lawmakers intended when they created this program. Was it just 9 deals? Was it just 15,000 jobs? But I mean, it was clear they had ambitious hopes for what the program would accomplish. Michigan is on the precipice of a modern industrial revolution. Our actions will set the stage for our grandchildren's futures, said one legislator upon passage of the program. I mean, if that's the goal, it clearly has not been achieved. We've spent $720 million and no jobs have been created. Now, again, I expect there to be jobs created at these facilities. They have spent a lot building buildings, and they're probably going to produce things out of the facilities that have gotten taxpayer funding. But how many will depend on an uncertain future. If deals do not result in the long-term job creation, which has been the experience of the state in previous deals, then lawmakers will have to utilize the clawbacks that are a part of deals. Still, even if the companies do not create jobs as expected, they can still take a lot of taxpayer money with no recourse. That is, if they eliminate jobs after the program window. Now, money for capital expenditures now and clawbacks later is different from the structures of other programs. Both MEGA and the Good Jobs for Michigan program do not make payments until jobs are added to company payrolls. And companies have to keep their jobs for at least 10 years and up to 20 in order to keep being paid. The critical industry program deals instead offer cash over the short term, regardless of job creation, and are contractually obligated to keep jobs around for shorter periods than the state's other major economic development deals. Now, I included a section or comments from deal sponsors in the headlines in these press releases to establish a standard of success. It's jobs and outcomes that the sponsors of deals promote when they make deals. You can see that sometimes they do include capital investments as something to trumpet, like for this deal, for example. But when they tell people, but they also tell people what this deal is going to accomplish for the broader state. And when they tell people what is going to happen, that ought to be the standard used to determine whether deals are successful or not. So when you look at the outcomes, that's not capital expenditures. And nor should capital expenditures be the standard of success that lawmakers should want for economic development programs. Spending hundreds of millions of dollars to build a factory that sits empty does not improve the state economy. It does not deliver on the statutory intent for the program or the stated intent that lawmakers have for deals. Now, as I mentioned to this committee, there is a better standard for what we should use to judge our economic development deals. We should require economic development deals to develop the economy. And we can track what our economic development deals, or the state's economic performance, and it's clear that that these deals fail to live up to their promise. So consider this oversimplification. This chart is Michigan's job growth compared to the national average from 1990 to the present. And I've got the major dates for changes in economic development policy included in here. As you can see, Michigan was beating the national average slightly from 1990 to the point where it created the MEGA program. And then the states started to decline. And after the state ended the mega program, the state started growing at around national averages. And since creating the Good Jobs for Michigan program and the SOAR fund and the critical industry program, we've been lagging the national growth. Now, look, Michigan's economy is large and complicated, and the relationship between economic development programs and job growth is not causative. There are bigger factors for Michigan's job loss from 2000 to 2020 than the existence of the mega program. I'm not arguing that this hurt or lagged, but what I'm arguing is that lawmakers clearly want economic development programs to make a difference in the state's economic performance. They say so. The sponsors say so when they make economic development deals. They say their deals will matter and that their deals will move the needle on Michigan's economy. But as we see from the record, the deals fail to deliver the broad-based economic growth that lawmakers intend. They even fail to make the standards of success that lawmakers make when deals are made. They don't produce the headline job numbers. And they should not consider the capital expenditure that companies do make in response to deals as evidence of success either, when the stated goals are outcomes rather than inputs. Still, this is my main argument for the whole thing. My major takeaway for you is that if you're going to continue operating the critical industry program, more of the deal needs to be based on actual job creation. When you have deals that consistently fall apart, that fail to deliver, you should not be paying them until they finally do the things that they're obligated to, or that lawmakers expect them to do. And that is job creation, not capital expenditures. Now, the good news is this requires no further statutory change. It only requires an expectation from legislators that they will not approve deals where payments are based on capital expenditures rather than job creation. This is a lesson from the past, and I hope that you guys apply it in the future. Thank you for letting me have this time, and we'll welcome any questions.
Thank you for your testimony, as always, Mr. Hohman. First question for you. What is the total number for dollars spent in the critical industry program to these companies?
Yes, I've got it right here. So far, $1.45 billion has been authorized, and how much has been spent is $720 million.
So the state has authorized roughly $1.5 billion. We have roughly 10 million people in the state of Michigan. On average, that's $150 from every man, woman, and child, which would be $750 from a family of 5. Do you think that investing in these handful of companies, $750 is what families want, or would they rather do something else with that $750?
So people do elect officials like yourselves to make these determinations. And when I look at what lawmakers say they're trying to accomplish from these deals, like we covered all of that. And the fact that they have not produced on those expectations really suggests this money can be better spent elsewhere. And I hope that lawmakers consider spending the money that they authorize for these special deals elsewhere.
Thank you. Looks like we have a question from Representative Pohutsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here again. I agree with you. I don't think that this is a solid way to go about economic development in the state. But I also have some questions about some of the things that were presented, because I don't think that we're actually going to reach a solution if we're not being completely transparent about it. So, for instance, some of the companies that you named that have received, have entered into agreements, haven't received any of those dollars yet. Mm-hmm. So, sure, they may not have met their metrics at this point in time, but they also haven't received anything. So I'm not sure that that's helpful to discuss that at this point if they aren't getting any of the money. Additionally, so for the GM, I believe that you had mentioned, I didn't see it on the screen in the press release, but I did remember that you mentioned that they had only secured, 3,200 jobs, right, out of the 4,000. The agreement was only for 3,200. Mm-hmm. I understand that at some point, the media had reported 4,000, but with all due respect, the Mackinac Center has said an awful lot of untrue things about me, too, and, I shouldn't be judged on me not living up to what has been said about me that was never true to begin with. So if we are, looking at this and examining it, at least today for the purposes of this hearing, against things that were never entered into an agreement to begin with, or with deals that if actually not solidified, no money has been given to these companies, how is that helpful in order to reach a conclusion? Isn't that skewing your data? Isn't that that's not an honest accounting of some of these deals?
So there were only 2 deals that I mentioned that were not agreement, but I think they're worth covering because, again, they show how the deals were going to be structured, even if they weren't agreed on, and that the structure does not represent or does not reflect the lessons that lawmakers should have learned. But the second one is that even though the deals were not established, our lawmakers are still promoting them. They're still telling us that we're going to produce great outcomes from these deals that we've proposed. And when they fall apart, they don't produce those outcomes that our lawmakers said that they would produce.
But isn't it disingenuous to not mention that at all when you're presenting them?
I mean, I did say the no deal was for the deals that were authorized but not agreed to. I did mention that no payments have been made, no jobs were created, and the deals were not agreed. So I'm not.
But where
I
did
guess
that
I'm not saying.
Can you tell me where that 4,000 number came from? Because that's one that I don't understand. The agreement was only for 3,200. I wish it was for 4,000. I wish that we had made 4,000 jobs.
Okay, so for that one, I'd have to look up my memory, but I'm pretty sure our lawmakers thumped their chest and said we've created 4,000 jobs from this deal, even though the deal was only for 3,200. Now, maybe that was someone else. Maybe that was a company official or some other spokesman for the deal mentioning 4,000. But that's what I saw in the headlines. And to that extent, that would be a criticism. If it was our lawmakers saying, no, we're only saying 3,200. Okay. Thanks, David. In the press release, the governor said 4,000.
That's great to know. I think that if we're not, frankly, I'm setting aside what the governor said in her press release. I can't help what she says, and I can't help if things are inflated. I just think that if we're actually going to tackle this, we need to be honest about the actual agreements and what the state entered into a contract saying. If the governor wants to say it was 4,000, that's on her. The state agreed to 3,200. If they delivered on 3,200, then we have to take that into account when we're re-examining how to address this problem.
Oh, I agree. I think everyone should be careful about over-promoting these deals. And one of the overall lessons that I think lawmakers should learn is that when companies say they're going to create X number of jobs, you should be very skeptical that they're going to meet those promises. And that should influence how we say, and you can see there's actually discrepancies even in the press releases that I've covered about whether they're saying these are absolutely jobs that are going to happen. You can bank on it, and then saying we would like to create this number of jobs. And I would like to see more skepticism and more hesitation so that we're not our officials are not misleading the public over the likelihood of these jobs.
How much transparency is appropriate over these types of programs, and do you believe that there should be more legislative oversight when these types of agreements are made?
So I think right now for these direct transfer payments, not MEGA, because MEGA can't be told how much, who's collecting how much, but for these programs, they're meeting minimum standards of transparency, which is the state will report on how much was offered, how much the company received, and whether they created the jobs that were announced. I think that's good, but there's a lot of improvements that can be made. So right now that's in their annual report. The annual report comes 6 months after the reporting date, so we really don't know the current status of most of the projects. The lag is pretty major, and if deals do fail, sometimes we can people have to wait for 18 months or more before they're told that some of these deals didn't happen. I think these are things that can be improved on. I think the bare minimum standard for economic development programs is can you say who got how much and what did they produce? There is that, but there is a lot of improvements that can be made.
Next question from Representative Bierlein.
If I may, Chair, I think I have two. First one, in stating some of the job numbers, where are the job numbers created coming from? Is that officially reported to the state, or is that what's actually happened because the state reporting cycle's like a year behind or 2 years behind?
Okay, so these job numbers that I'm showing right now are the Bureau of Labor Statistic figures.
For the job programs
yes.
through SOAR.
So this, the state does have a process where they're not just relying upon companies saying that they've created jobs. I'm reporting on what has been verified and validated by the state and then reported in these state programs.
So I know on one of the Corning program, for instance, they've pre-hired 1,100 people, but you're reporting 0 because they haven't opened yet. It's not, the factory isn't built.
Yeah.
So, well, I think those are important things as we're having this discussion to consider how we're reporting information so we can get the right information. But what I'd really like to hear from you, we've talked about when we had MEDC in here and we were talking about how do you determine if a project is a good project? And they use, is it REMI or they use Alice population. They use this REMI thing that, we're going to invest this many dollars and it's going to kick this much back in. What would you recommend? Because I think we don't always agree on all of this, but making good investments is important. How should we be measuring those investments? Like, what is the right way to do that?
Okay, so the state does have an economic development evaluation process. I don't know what the status is of that, but they're also asking the wrong questions for the evaluation. Economic development programs, again, should be evaluated on whether they produce good economic outcomes. And so if you're going to use a black box model to measure extra economic impact, what you need to do is measure that against alternative uses of spending, because economic development programs need to show that they not only produce just as much as spending money on schools or roads or whatever alternative you decide to measure it against, but have so much larger of an economic impact that they would justify their expenses. But I would also argue again that if that's the goal, we should be a little more explicit, if that's the standard that you want to use for economic development, you should be more explicit that means that you shouldn't expect these programs necessarily to increase Michigan's overall economic performance. It would be increasing Michigan's economic performance, but only for this company in these particular ways, whereas the rest of the economy is just left untouched. So there are competing standards. You should do that. The standards I've been using are, does it produce good economic, a noticeable effect on state's economic performance, and does it produce the jobs that our lawmakers say that it's going to produce?
Well, I appreciate that, because I think that's something that we haven't really gotten a good answer on, is how does the state decide if this is a good investment or not? And they have their system, but we haven't seen that. And so I appreciate that. Thank you.
That's a great point you make about the competing standards, because there are opportunity costs with this. If we look at and say, well, it created jobs and then it trickled down this way and these economies in this area benefited, in certain ways, there's so much economic activity that could have happened had the opportunity cost been done instead. And I think that's something that these models often forget to look into. So my question for you, working off of that, is there a risk that Michigan becomes overly dependent on these one-time deals as opposed to an economically vibrant society at large?
The state economy creates and loses over 800,000 jobs every year. Again, this is the numbers from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. There's a massive amount of turnover. And whether we're adding more jobs or losing more jobs is largely dependent upon what's going on in the broader economy, not on how many deals our lawmakers make. So the economy is going to continue to be dependent upon the churn of our private institutions far more than its deal-making authority. But as you can see, the state's deal-making has, while I argue it does not have a material effect on Michigan's overall economic trends, does have a material effect on the budget. mean, $720 million is a lot of money. Lawmakers have authorized $4.7 billion in business subsidies over the past 2 years. They can accomplish a lot of other goals with that money.
Next question from Vice Chair Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's always, these are interesting to learn about. I wasn't here when it was voted in. Actually, a couple of us on this weren't here as well, and I don't even know if anybody here actually voted for this. Well, maybe one, but yeah, okay. So it's a predicament to be put in now as a legislator who's stuck with this legacy cost. So I guess moving forward, if you could change or restructure or rewrite the SOAR program, since we have it, do you have any recommendations for that as a legislator?
Okay, so if you think that there's a good chance that this is going to produce good outcomes, and I again argue that as you can see, Michigan's fallen behind as we've been making these massive deals. But if you want to make an improvement to this program, I would suggest putting in statute that payments to companies need to be based on job creation, compensation for new jobs, more than capital expenditures. Now, companies prefer short-term cash than long-term cash, but if the point is to create jobs with these programs, you should tie the payments to job creation to a greater extent than already exists in the deals that have been made. And that's something you can do via statute.
So would that be getting rewarded after the product or whatever has been produced?
It's not, it would be, maybe you do a portion of it based on capital expenditures, but the company makes the deal, they build their buildings, and they get some of the money, but most of their payments come from when they actually hire people and then pay them over a series of years. Which again, like some of these things are for less than 10 years. And after 10 years, if the company closes their job or closes the facility, the state's just out its cash. And I think lawmakers really want jobs to last longer for that than that.
Absolutely. How many other states offer programs like these?
Oh, so few. Michigan is one of the leaders in offering short-term cash directly to companies. I did a review last year, and I saw Illinois had offered a new program that was like this. I believe it was Pennsylvania or Virginia, but there were not many. States that offer massive amounts of short-term cash to whatever company lawmakers want with an unstructured program. As you saw from some of the previous ones, the way that a lot of these numbers get up to the hundreds of millions is by saying 5% for every new job for 30 years. Michigan doesn't do that. We get to hundreds of millions by just saying, here's $100 million for our capital expenditures.
Are you familiar with Huntsville at all?
Alabama?
Yeah.
I haven't been there, but and so only familiar with the name.
I would just be curious if the Mackinac Center would do maybe, what are they doing that's so unique? I visited it recently, and they're taking a lot of our aerospace and defense opportunities down there, and they're just booming. And I'm just, is it the warm weather that attracts people, or is there a climate that is why they've taken this town that was in the middle of a farm field, and now it's a booming metropolis that's one of the hottest locations to move to, which you would think Southeast Michigan would have that same opportunity. I was just curious if any think tanks have studied that.
I wrote it down. I do have a friend who used to work in the Alabama economic development space. He's now an economist for the Middle Tennessee State University. So I can ask around and see if I hear anything.
Appreciate it.
Get back to you. I wrote it down.
If you had to pick between the critical industry program and mega credits, which program would you take if you had to have one?
So let me tell you about all the problems of mega. You can't be told who's collecting how much money you've got. The deals were lagged, like the reporting was terrible. You could never be told which the deals are active and which are not. Only 2.2% of job creation deals for mega ever met expectations. This is, just, we've got a report on that. I can send it to you. But the money that these companies get do not go through appropriations process. You're contractually obligated to spend, money 20 years in the future. And even with all of those problems, I would rather have MEGA than the critical industry program. It does not pay when jobs are not created.
Thank you. Next question from Minority Vice Chair Wagella.
Thanks for being here. I think it's beyond time we start looking at different ways to get the economy to move. And when I think about the economy, I don't think like, how is big business doing, right? Or how are these large corporations' health doing? I think, how does the working class American do? And we know in Lansing here, we've had some debates over the last couple months about roads and what we should do as part of that solution. And I think every single one of us in this state essentially have to use the roads in some capacity or another. So before I ask my question related to roads, what is the average length of these deals in terms of time? Because I think that's an important piece of when we look at the future of the state. Are they 10 years, are they less or more?
For the critical industry program deals, it's less than 10 years. But that's completely optional. Like, there's no statute that says they have to be less than 10 years or that companies wouldn't have to be contractually obligated to retain jobs for longer.
And after that, essentially the companies are free to do whatever they want without the threat of any clawbacks.
They have met their contractual obligations for job creation or retention after that point, yes.
And the reason I ask that is because that's in my mind, relatively short period of time. If you invest in a road, I think if you're getting asphalt roads, it's like 15 to 20 years, and then concrete roads are 25 to 40, depending on various factors. Plus, my understanding is the return on investment for road funding is much higher than it is for programs such as these. I think even to the MEDC's own estimates of the return on investment. So my question for the Mackinac Center is, would the Mackinac Center support taking the $500 million a year in SOAR funds and putting it directly into local or state roads?
Yes. We already have endorsed that. It's part of the House proposal. That's the part that I like about that proposal most.
Are there any other areas where public dollars could stay in public spaces that the Mackinac Center would see worthy in this money going towards?
Yeah. I mean, you'd have to depend on the exact thing, but like we've listed tons of a number of spending areas that we don't think provides good returns to taxpayers or provide enough public benefits for the money that gets spent. I would love to see those spent on something that does provide better returns to the public.
In your view, what is the most misunderstood concept around corporate incentives that lawmakers or the general public would not understand?
I think, as you can see, announcements aren't performance. This is something that our lawmakers seem to promote. This is just an example. Again, like I put headlines for all the state's major job deals, and it's very rare that you see a job announcement treated as something that is not a done deal that is going to happen. And I think if there was more skepticism and that this is a hope, if there's more belief that this is a hope, that this is, I think, an intention that we want to make sure happens, and that we better tie payments to companies to their actual performance, we would have better policy in Michigan.
So what's promised and what is delivered are not necessarily the same thing.
Exactly.
Good. Next question from Representative Bierlein.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think you kind of asked the question that I wanted to ask. So as we were talking about SOAR reform, and you mentioned moving to more results based on the hiring side. Well, wait a minute, that sounds like what MEGA was more performance based on the hiring side. So are there reforms, because I know we've talked about MEGA in the past, and I know that the Mackinac Center isn't a fan of MEGA either. Are there reforms there that where MEGA would make more sense than SOAR with the right reforms if the state was going to have a economic development system?
Yeah, as I said, the fact that MEGA does not pay companies don't receive refundable tax credits until they're actually creating jobs, and the fact that those are small payments over the long term, they have to keep up those jobs over a longer period of time in order to maintain eligibility. I think that that is a better structure for the program. or for an economic development program, and it's also would be it would be better. It would be a better reflection of the state's experience, because again, you don't want to be in a position where you paid out a lot of money, the company didn't create jobs, and now it doesn't even have the money to pay back for jobs that it didn't create, or that you've paid out all of this money, the short-term period is over, the company closes, and taxpayers are just out of that money. Those are things that apply to the critical industry program that don't apply to MEGA.
There we go. Would it make more sense for, I think one of the complaints that we've had with MEGA is, and we just like to pick on GM because they were the big receiver, but so if GM says we're going to retain 40,000 jobs, it's 40,000 specific jobs. They could cut another 20 somewhere else. Would it make more sense for MEGA reform to not have that option? Like if you say you're going to retain this many jobs in the state of Michigan, you retain this many jobs, not those jobs. So I could pay you for these 5,000 while you move these 5,000 out of state.
Yeah.
Would it make more sense if we're looking at how this system should work, if it's job retention, it's all jobs and not just these specific jobs?
So I do think that our administrators have learned some of those lessons. You can see for these programs, and I didn't mention it just because it was focused on what's triggering payments, but companies are obligated to maintain how many jobs that they had in the state when the deals were made. And there can be triggering clawbacks if they're shifting things from one place to the other in the state, of cutting jobs in one location, moving them elsewhere. So I think that's a good feature that you should look for it. But not all the deals have that. Now, I do think that higher standards should be placed for retention credits. So as we've seen from deals, it's much easier to get to pay a company to not eliminate jobs. They're more likely to do that than it is to expand on jobs. The job creation deals tend to fail, tend to not produce as expected. But job retention credits or job retention projects tend to be more likely to retain the jobs that were said.
Question from Vice Chair Green.
Well, it was just a follow-up on the GM, because we paid out money to GM, correct?
Yes, and we still are obligated for the next couple of years.
But they haven't met the requirements?
No, they've met their job. They are contractually obligated to retain a certain number of jobs, and they've been at their maximum number of jobs that they've been to retain. And for these global retention deals, I think, and again, like I haven't verified, but it was told or it's been reported, when they made those deals in 2008, it covered all of 2010. Memories sometimes like about that. But when they made those deals, the deals essentially covered all of the employment that these companies had in the state of Michigan at the time. So if you expand jobs later in the future, you don't get extra mega credits for that, or at least if you go above the maximum amounts. And then at that point, you can cut jobs and not lose your mega credits.
Okay.
Another quick question from Representative Bierlein.
So follow up to kind of how Rep. Green posed that. So if you had a company operating under MEGA, and then they got a SOAR funding job to create these new jobs, so if they had a retention MEGA credit, they had a SOAR project, they move people from one location to the other. Did they create those jobs, or did they retain those jobs, or or is it convoluted?
So
I think these are the questions that we're trying to figure out. What is the best way to do this kind of thing, or if we should be doing it at all in some cases. But just to know how it's actually working really helps.
Where there is double dipping, as in it's usually not for state payments towards jobs. It's just stacking up existing programs that already exist. So property tax credits, property tax exemptions, that site preparation money, and then other payments. And the deals that I've seen where companies have mega agreements and are also looking for SOAR, so GM, Dow, I think it's come up there. I think our administrators have been careful to structure the deals so that the companies are not double dipping, but I have not seen that confirmed.
Just to confirm the Mackinac Center's position, we're talking about how if we are going to give these incentives, having performance-based metrics and those types of things would be less bad. Would they be preferred, or would just a general free market as a whole be ultimately the best?
Look, I really want the public to be more skeptical of the state's attempts to improve the economy by handing out taxpayer subsidies to select companies. I think that doesn't work. I think the economic literature says that you cannot accomplish the appropriate goals and this, or cannot accomplish your job creation goals with this strategy, and it would be better for the state to get rid of them. However, if you're asking me, can we do it better than what we've got? Yes, we can do a lot better than the way these critical industry program deals are structured.
Thank you. Next question from Minority Vice Chair Wagella.
Was hoping to, if you could go to the one slide. I think you mentioned when you were going over this, and correct me if I'm wrong, that 90% of the money for that deal were not based on job creation, I should say.
Yes. Let's see. I think that was.
It was One Next Energy.
Okay. Yeah. So that is. Oh no, it's too far. This deal. Yes.
Was that what you said? Was it 90% were not based on job creation metrics?
Mm-hmm. Let me go through the deals for that one. Again, that's why I'm glad I wrote down the notes. That was $200 million. Only 10% of the deal is based on job creation milestones.
So my question is, what are the milestones based on in that deal then?
I would have to look over it again, but some of it was securing customers for some of their products, securing investments from outside investors. I think some of it was getting the production line up and going. Those were things that the company was required to do in order to get it. But the actual payments that the company would get on receive. Like, you have to do all of these things. You have to check these boxes, but we're going to reimburse you as you make your capital expenditures. So it's 90% on that, and then 10%.
Have they started receiving money yet? I couldn't remember.
Yeah, they got their first $70 million.
Okay, and so here's where I'm going with this. So they make the capital improvements. After they get the money and spend the money, if they don't create the jobs at any point, is there anything the state can do to get that 90% back? So, like, for example, let's say they figure out a way to do their production lines through robotics or AI, and they don't need physical employees in the building in those positions. They've made the capital investment, but they haven't made the jobs. Yeah. Are they on the hook for not creating the jobs, or is that only for that 10% of the deal?
So what happens is that in order to get the payments from the state, you have it's the capital investment, and it's just that last 10% that has some job creation to it. But at the end of the deal, at the end of the deal, the state has to look at them and say, did you meet that minimum job requirement? Did you create the 2,112 jobs? And so if in your situation, this is a completely automated factory, there's no one working at it, the state looks and says, well, you've got no jobs. So now we're going to ask for a clawback for that whole $200 million that you've received. So yes, it would be, but it's only that clawback for a particular date.
Got it. So they could, but it would be at the end of the deal. Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Another question from Representative Pohotsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Building on that, if I'm remembering this correctly, there's like different buckets of money that these SOAR programs go to, and one of them is like site readiness, essentially, right? So like the capital investments and things like that. So again, like going back to press releases, those being disingenuous, maybe that may be true, but that original bucket of money for this particular site was not for job creation. It was to build a site that could potentially, maybe, lead to job creation, right?
Yes. So and that is that's money too that I don't like unless there's malfeasance or they're spending this on something else. You can't claw it back. So you're spending the site preparation money in hopes that the company would come. That company can get clawed back for its direct subsidies, but not that site preparation money that goes to local development agency.
Right, because again, like I'm just a lot of this seems like the issue is with disingenuous press releases, which like I'm there with you. Like this is infuriating, but they did what they said they were going to do with that money. So
for site preparation stuff,
right.
Yeah, I do think that my criticism was not that these local development agencies are misspending the funds. It's that you shouldn't structure job creation deals to not require job creation.
I agree, but that's not what this deal was. This was a site readiness deal.
Oh, well, so all the ones that I've covered today are just the direct company ones. So I did mention $150 million for the Marshall Plan is site preparation, but the terms of the deal that I mentioned and was talking about were the critical industry portion of that. I just felt it relevant to matter because I said that there were no payments, and it's like, well, there are these payments for site preparation.
Sure. Okay. I struggle a little bit because I think that there are enough problems with this program without us like being disingenuous about it. Like if they did in fact do what they were supposed to do with that money, the state making a bad investment or being unwise with its dollars, like that's what we're here to uncover. Mm-hmm. But like they did what they were supposed to do. They got a site ready. You can't put 2,000 jobs in a site that is not ready for 2,000 jobs. So I think that maybe we just need to, again, stop trying to make it worse than it already is. I agree with you. I'm not sure that this is I am sure that this is not the best use of our money and that this program is flawed. But I don't think that basing it all around admittedly disingenuous press releases, there are enough flaws there with it. We don't have to like jump several steps ahead about like whether or not there were 2,000 jobs at a site that was not ready for 2,000 jobs.
So I do have a piece from a year or two ago criticizing the site selection portion of this money. I would be happy to see if you think that I was being disingenuous with that, because I think I was pretty clear that if we're going to do this, or that if there are bad decisions, it's bad decisions that are being made at the state level.
And the governor should quit tricking the people of Michigan with her disingenuous press releases she keeps putting out. Is that fair to say? Or
at least provide the same type of promotion when deals fall apart or don't produce as expected. Because you've told people, this big great thing that you're going to do. If it doesn't happen, let's try and give that as much attention.
Next question from.
And that's some of the stuff that I'm trying to do.
Thank you, and we appreciate that. Next question from Minority Vice Chair Wagella.
Just coming back to One Next Energy, I guess I'm beating up on them today, but what I think is interesting about that deal is, that company's not doing really well right now. I believe they've been closing various plants and offices in different areas. I think I mentioned this a little bit with MADC, but I'm curious your take. We've already given some of that money out, as you've mentioned. The jobs haven't been created yet, and it feels like that's a company that could potentially file bankruptcy in the next several years if things don't turn around. If they file bankruptcy, what are the realistic odds of Michigan ever getting that money clawed back in that deal? I mean, are we at the top of that list? Are we at the bottom of that list? Is that even something that is possible to happen? That's a concern that I have in that specific deal, but I think it shows, one of the problems with these, I kind of believe if there is going to be a free market, those free market companies should be able to survive without public assistance. And if they can't, then they should either not exist or the government or the public should own those industries. I think there's an interesting argument to be made there, but with One Next Energy, is there any hope of us really seeing that money back if they are to file bankruptcy?
That really depends on the company's financial position. The way I understand some of these bankruptcy settlements is like if you owe money to the state for taxes, that's one of the top things that companies are required to pay. For these state grants, I just do not know. I assume the state's gone through this experience with it before. I assume some of our administrators would be able to tell you how that's played out. I suspect that we'd be better than unsecured equity or unsecured debtors, but I don't know.
Thank you for your testimony today, Mr. Hohman. Thank you for the questions from the committee. With no further questions or business before the committee will stand adjourned.